All right, we're moving along here. So this is the first game from round four, which I would say was clearly the game of the tournament. Probably the best game of all the three tournaments so far. Um, this was just a very impressive game. So here Steven had the white pieces and Brian had the black pieces. So I have been looking forward to covering this particular game. Yeah, once again, I was surprised by the amount of abandoned games we had. I think I'm going to send an email to Chess Kids and see if they can kind of help me out with what happened, why there were so many abandoned games. I think the kids were. I didn't notice like any of the kids like leaving the tournament while the tournament was going on. I'm not sure if I missed anything, but it did seem like we had a really high percentage of abandoned games, and yeah, it's making it. It's a lot easier to go through the games than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would take more time, but with all the abandoned games, it's actually not quite so bad. All right, so here we had e4, c5. So once again, Steven had the white pieces and Brian had the black pieces. So here we had a Sicilian defense, which I have to admit I'm kind of happy. I have looked at quite a few Italian games, so it's nice to see a different opening. So the idea behind the Sicilian is where this is more of a counterattacking. I guess you can call it defense, but it sort of could almost be considered like just black launching an offense right at the beginning of the game. So here we have the white pawn attacking the d5 square, and we have the black pawn attacking the d4 square. But they're doing it in a different way. So as opposed to like the e5 openings where white attacks d5 and black attacks d4 in this symmetrical way, here we have already a counter-attacking defense because here we're attacking with what's considered a wing pawn. So something like on these parts of the boards are more of the wing pawns as opposed to a center pawn. So black is already aiming for queenside expansion, meaning they might want to push the queenside pawns up the board at some point during the game, typically by some maneuver like a6 and b5. And remember, when you have more space, when your pawns move, creating more space for your pieces, it just allows your pieces to be more active. So the more space your pieces have, the more activity they'll end up having in the game. So here we have knight f3, knight c6, and yeah, this position there was a lot of games in the World Championship between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana in this variation. So yeah, here the game can still go in a number of different directions. The most common move is d4 here, but also moves like bishop b5 are also really common. Knight c3 is a nice developing move. This move is not quite as common, but still a very logical move here. All right, so here Brian played d6, preventing the pawn pushing from e5 and allowing the knight to get to f6. Another idea here is actually just to play e5 right away. So this move is it weakens the d5 square as we don't have any pawns now that can attack d5 at the moment, and we may never have a pawn attacking d5 the rest of the game. But what we do have is we did gain quite a bit of space, and we made it difficult for. We basically just have a fair amount of space here. In exchange for this weakness on d5. At some point, we would like to play d5 ourselves, and if we can get that move in safely, then we probably have equality. So just one line that I should give here is after bishop c4, we wouldn't want to go with the normal knight f6. So remember, position is everything in chess, so anytime the position is different than you're accustomed to, you definitely want to calculate the possibilities. But yeah, the reason why knight f6 is no good here is because after knight g5, attacking the f7 pawn twice, and there's only one defender. This is just a threat that black cannot meet. So yeah, what else did I want to say? So yeah, basically the weakness on f7 kind of strikes again. So this is similar to the e4, e5 openings. We've seen a lot of ideas where the knight comes to g5, attacking f7. So yeah, so what you want to do here is actually play bishop e7, controlling the g5 square. And then after say something like castles, now you can play knight f6 because after the white knight comes to g5, now you have the possibility of castle, which you didn't have before. So remember, after knight g5, if you have the ability to castle, that is almost always the right move for black, unless the knight is hanging, for example, or some other problem for white. But yeah, if the objective is just to defend the f7 square, you pretty much just always want to just castle here as black. There is one other cool line that I would like to show you guys. So let's say we play bishop e7, let's say d3, and then d6. Here I saw this in a book many years ago. This idea of knight g5. It is slightly better for black, but it's just a cool variation I wanted to show you guys. So here you just here you have two attackers on the knight, and there's only one defender, so it looks like you're just giving the knight away for free. But here you have this pretty cool in-between move, queen h5. So here you're threatening the bishop, and you're also threatening a checkmate on f7, and this will get you the piece back. So for example, let's say g6, take, take. But I do remember hearing that, or I remember reading in the book that this variation was actually slightly better for black still. But it's just a cool variation to know. And then today, there's the rapid games going on between like some of the top players in the world. Here, in this position, I don't know if probably black played knight f6, but I think here they saw something like knight d2 here, with the possible idea of playing f4 and putting some pressure on the center. So this is with what Jan Nepomniachtchi played, who is one of the top players in the world from Russia. Yeah, so okay, that's just kind of a sideline, but yeah, let's get back to the game. This is a cool variation to know though. So since white didn't play d4 on this move, that's the reason why black is able to get this e5 move in. Okay, so knight c3, d6, bishop c4. So bishop c4 is a very logical move, attacking the weak pawn f7 again. And then here we had bishop e6, which okay, I don't think this move is particularly great for black here. I think if you want to restrict the access that the bishop has along the a2 to g8 diagonal, the most common move would just be e6 here, and then this could be followed by getting your king side pieces developed and getting your king castled. So yeah, bishop e6 I wouldn't say is at all common here. So yeah, I think Steven played this very well. So he took and created this weakness on e6, and then he played d3. So this is a very positional move. He just he has the dark square bishop, so he's putting all of his pawns on light squares. So this concept we haven't really gotten to too much. We have a little bit, but not extremely amount of talking about this. But when you have your pawns on light squares, it's generally your dark square bishop that will be the good bishop, and it's generally the light square bishop that will be your bad bishop, particularly if it's not outside the pawn chain. So if you get the light square bishop outside the pawn chain, say to c4, then your light square bishop should be fine still. But the general premise is that when your pawn's on light squares, it's the dark square diagonal that has the most scope. So therefore, the bishop that's on the opposite color of your of the center pawn. So here the center pawns are on light squares. So it's the dark square bishop that should be the better bishop for white here. So yeah, so I think this was very logical by Steven. He could have tried to go for d4. I was also wondering if just knight g5 hitting this the weak e6 pawn was a good idea. So for example, maybe something like queen d7 and queen g4 looked quite tempting to me. But after knight d8, just guarding the pawn again, I'm not really sure if this does end up giving white much, because now black can just start developing their pieces with some tempo. And yeah, I don't think this is particularly strong for white here. But yeah, we do want to try to target this e6 pawn as white if we can at some point. All right, so d3, knight f6, and yeah, I'm really enjoying watching Bryan's games. He's quickly grasped the concept of getting his pieces developed, getting his king safe, and these were things that when we first started working together, he wasn't doing as often, and to be honest, he wasn't really doing it in most of the games that I looked at. So I've already noticed like a really big improvement in his style just from when we first started, working together and going over his games and stuff. All right, so bishop g5, so very, very good developing move here by Steven. And you can see, so remember, I said this in one of the other videos. I'm assuming that everyone's watched all the videos, but when I'm looking at a game, I'm just trying to see if there's like consistency in the moves. So here the idea of d3 is to get the dark square bishop developed. So since Steven went ahead and continued with that plan, then you can see that there's like some there's consistency in his play, and his moves like make sense in combination with each other. Which is what you want to try to do. So here we had g6, queen d2. So yeah, this is just a really, really nice play by Steven. So he's getting his queen, his bishop on this long diagonal, and frequently if you can get the bishop to h6 and trade off your opponent's dark square bishop, you should have a good game as white. I used to think that if you can get this dark square bishop, it was just like an overwhelming advantage. Now after looking at a lot of my games with computers, I realized that it's not like such a devastating exchange. But it does make your position slightly uncomfortable, I would say. and then depending on the position, it could just get very bad. So yeah, so after a move like bishop g7, I don't know if bishop h6 right away is the right move, but it definitely could be. Probably with the king not castled yet, we could actually go for something like this as black. I don't know what Steven would do here, but say he castles king side, we could castle queen side. So yeah, so actually we can since our king hasn't castled king side yet as black, it is actually possible in a lot of these variations to just take the bishop and then send your king to the queen side is very possible. But okay, let's go to the game continuation here. Here Bryan played h6, which seems quite reasonable, attacking the bishop. We have two defenders of the h6 pawn versus the. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Versus the two attackers. So here we're okay. And then yeah, I don't know if Steven should have taken here. Like I'm wondering if something like bishop h4, just keeping the pin is probably a slightly more accurate move, I would say. Bishop e3, allowing knight g4 might, I don't know, this might not be so great for white, but again, I'm not 100% sure. Here I did create a small weakness on d5, but the e pawn should be able to cover that with e6. So yeah, so I can't say that Steven's move of trading the bishop for the knight is so bad. It is a perfectly logical move, I would say. So yeah, so I really like the black pawn structure here. This is kind of what made this game so fascinating. I sort of came into this game midway. I don't remember which one of the games I was watching, but yeah, I wish I would have paid a bit more attention to this game. I just remember kind of clicking on the game during the middle game and just being pretty astounded by this pawn structure. Because I know that Bryan wasn't just like moving the pawns up, so I was kind of wondering how this happened. So it's pretty funny to see how not only did the pawns get undoubled, so they had the double pawns here, but also how each one of these pawns moved one square. All right, so here we had h3. So I'm not 100% sure why this move was played. Typically, you want to play h3 to both potentially give an escape square to your king if you're castled, and then obviously to control the g4 square. But it doesn't look like black had any pieces intending to move to g4, so I didn't fully understand this move. But okay, so here we had bishop e7. I think bishop e7 is fine. I also would have thought bishop g7 deserves consideration because we would like to put the bishop on this long diagonal. So here at some point, like probably castle first, and then at some point we can consider this like f5 move, and then this bishop should just have a very nice scope because there's really nothing blocking the bishop from basically attacking like at least up to c3, and then if the knight moves, putting a lot of pressure on the b2 square potentially. But bishop e7 also seems logical, although I'd say a bit more passive than bishop g7. Okay, so we have castle. Yeah, so if you're gonna castle, then yeah, so I think here the bishop should be on g7 just to defend the h6 pawn, because when you put the bishop on e7 and then castle, now the queen is just able to take on h6 for free. But if the bishop would be on g7, then it's still protecting the h6 pawn, so we could castle and not worry about giving up a pawn here. Yeah, so yeah, Steven is a really strong player. I had no idea when I first started teaching him he was going to be this good, and yeah, he's really been he's really got a really solid game that I've noticed, and also an aggressive game. He also can attack quite well. So yeah, I think he's got a ton of potential, Steven. So I hope that that we could after working with him, I just hope that we can just kind of take his natural talent and kind of harness it in the right direction, and hopefully he'll get even a lot stronger. But you can already see the potential is clearly here. So yeah, so this is just a free pawn. All right, so g5. So I guess we're trying to trap the bishop in, but the bishop does have quite a few ways to escape here. Maybe not quite a few, but it does have at least one. It can go queen h5, and maybe after the knight moves somewhere, we could just bring the queen back if we need to. So queen g6 is reasonable. Okay, so here we had a little what our friend this guy Stephen Barbie likes to say, the old curly shuffle. He was a big Three Stooges fan, I assume. Although we never really actually talk about the Three Stooges very much. All right, so here we had g3. Okay, yeah, so these moves I'm not fully understanding. So yeah, I guess the idea is to play h4, but we can always play h4 right away since the queen's protecting it. So I don't. Yeah, these two pawn moves are kind of curious moves by Steven. I think he's trying to figure out a plan, and he doesn't know exactly what he should do. So yeah, I guess if I'm going to say something like that, I should try to find an improvement for him. Um, yeah, I guess like if I could just get away with three free moves, I would want to put the knight from e2 to g3 to h5, and then threaten a checkmate on the g7 square. But I am a bit concerned that if we go for this, we are allowing, like, say, rook f7, and I don't know if we're going to have time for this. So my other idea then would be to just bring the queen back. Like if we don't really have an attack here, then the queen is sort of misplaced here now. We did pick up the pawn. So maybe something like knight h2, and then just bring the queen back to e2. Seems like a logical plan. Yeah, but this g3 move, I don't really see what the idea is here. So I would like to ask Stephen about this move at some point in one of our classes. But I don't know. At this point, it might just feel like an old game to them. They might want to move on to some more interesting things than talk about the past. But if it does come up, I will ask Stephen why he did this move. All right, so king f7 is a really nice move by Bryan here. So he's trying to just run away with his king, which I think is a really smart idea. So the shelter on the king side is sort of breaking down a bit. So here also he's able to move the rook to h8 and attack this h3 pawn, which is another reason why g3 just seems so strange to me, is that after we play g3, we weaken the h3 square. So I don't know why we would want to weaken this h3 pawn, because now we're just allowing black to attack the pawn here. Okay, so queen h7. Yeah, and then I really like Bryan's plan here. So he just decides, like, the king side is no good for my king. I want to attack on the king side with my rook. So I'm just going to bring my king over this way and call it a day. So yeah, so actually all these checks just allow Bryan's king to accomplish that feat. And then, okay, e5 here. So yeah, so I think that he's realizing, Stephen, that his queen is sort of trapped here. So this e5 move is a nice way to try to get the queen back. I would be tempted, if I was black, to maybe just play f5 here potentially, and then just say, like, I'm gonna try to trap your queen here. There would be some calculation we would need to do, but if we could, once again, if we can get some free moves in for black here, I would love to play. I'd love to play something like rook h8, queen c7, and then bring this other rook to g8, and we're gonna try to trap the queen on f7 at some point. It might not be as easy as I thought it would be, but this queen is definitely lacking for squares here. So I think this f5 move, just trying to trap the queen in, is a really reasonable idea here. Maybe also something like, say we could try something like. I mean, this is going to take a lot of moves, but say we could try something like queen f8, and then maybe rook e8, bishop d8. Rook e7, and then rook g7, trapping the queen. But yeah, this does feel like quite a few moves. And now actually we have two attackers on the g5 pawn and only one defender. So yeah, maybe this wouldn't work. So yeah, let's see what Bryan did. So Bryan played knight takes e5, which I think is also quite logical. Okay, take. All right, so here I think we probably should take with the. I don't know. I think we should probably take with the f pawn here, because we would like to get like an open file for the black rook. Yeah, and I think it just feels like the king just feels a bit. It just feels slightly exposed after taking with this pawn. Is all I could. I wish I can give like more moves, but conceptually it just feels like the king is a bit weaker after we take with the d pawn, because this pawn was providing some shelter to the king. And now that shelter is sort of gone. So yeah, I don't know. Probably maybe the computer is gonna, because normally we want to take towards the center. I guess both these moves are taking towards the center though. Maybe this combination of f and g pawn are going to be productive for a king side attack at some point. So yeah, I'm curious. Maybe Bryan's going to prove me wrong here. So let's see what the computer says. So it looks like it finds both d takes e5 and f takes e5 exactly the same. Okay, so yeah, if it's exactly the same, I can't find too much criticism here. And I do like how the evaluation is basically even here, even though black is down a pawn. There are some weaknesses in front of the white king, namely the h3 pawn. So yeah, so this is fairly interesting. So here we have queen e4, and yeah, another reason why I can tell that Stephen is a really good player is because his moves are just like very logical. Like he pushed the F pawn so he could bring the queen back. So he has like he's not just making like individual moves and then if you like respond to it, he doesn't know what to do. His basically his moves like work very well in conjunction with each other. All right, so here we had rook h8, which I like that we're getting the rook on the half open h file, but I do think we probably should respond to this tactic here. It's just not so clear like what the best way to respond to it is. Like I see if we're trying to launch an attack, we don't want to like allow a queen trade. So something like queen c7, knight b5, like queen either b5 or c6 here. Maybe queen b6. But our queen is sort of running away from the king side attack a bit. Maybe with like a move like c4, the queen could get active on the f2 pawn at some point. But yeah, I could see why this wasn't like so attractive to Bryan. I'm wondering like, yeah, it's just really hard to figure out like maybe just like rook b8 defending the pawn is best here. Because I don't think we would really prefer. We don't really want to allow the queen to get to this b7 square if it can. So let's just go through the game. Yeah, so now the king run back. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this this king maneuver by Bryan. So basically he castled, then he maneuvered his king back this way, and then now his king is just back on the starting square. So it is this is quite humorous. All right, so here we had queen g2. So I think this was the first real mistake I remember from from Steve in this game. I think that just king g2 is a much better move. And then if black ever tries to, it's not easy for black to pressure the h3 pawn again in the first place, but if it does, we could always try to play rook h1. And then after something like rook b8, we do have queen c6 check. And I think if we're able to trade off the queens here, so if black goes something like this, I just like I like white's position a lot here because they are up a pawn. This c5 pawn is quite weak. We do have the nice e4 square for our knight if we need it. Yeah, and at some point we could probably try to play like rook h1 and h4, trying to open up the h file. And yeah, I just think white's position is much easier to play here. So yeah, I was surprised when Steven brought the queen back, because now you don't really want your major pieces to just have this function of just protecting the pawn. So yeah, so I thought this was a bit of a weak. It's just not a weak. Weak's not the right word. It's just more of a defensive maneuver, I would say. So here we have king f7. So yeah, this king march is pretty classic. It's really funny how the king is marching. So rook a d1. Yeah, I think this move makes sense if we can get d4 in, but since we're never really going to get d4 in, or at least not for a very long time, like we basically would have to move the knight somewhere and then play like c3 and d4. The rook, normally the rook on an open file, or on a, not an open file, on a central file is quite logical, but here we're not really ever planning on going to d4. So unless you want to put like the rook on d2 and guard the second rank, this doesn't seem that productive. So we're at f5 here. And then, okay, so now I thought, yeah, f3. So I'm wondering if Steven's idea was to put the rook on d2 and he wants to use this to control the second rank. But I do think this f3 maneuver does seem quite slow. No, we're just weakening the diagonal to our king. And whenever you make a pawn move, you're also weakening squares. So we did also weaken the e3 square. So when the pawn's on f2, we're defending the e3 square, but from f3, we're not defending the e3 square anymore. So yeah, I think this is a bit of a risky decision from white here, and I can't say I fully get the idea. So we had queen b6, king h1. So yeah, so trying to avoid this c4 push and then creating a discovered attack on the king. So yeah, king h1 seems good. I think king h2 might be even better though, so that we have the king protecting the pawn. Typically, we wouldn't want to put the king on the color of our opponent's color of our opponent's bishop. But here, I think king h2 does make some sense, just so the queen doesn't have to guard the h3 pawn anymore. All right, but king h1 also seems to make sense. And then I think that yeah, I think black can just go for queen takes b2. Probably Bryan was slightly concerned about like rook b1 getting the b file. But since the knight is under attack, we do have a good opportunity to pick up some moves here. So and then also notice that if queen d2, we have this rook takes h3 move, which is another reason why king h2 is probably better, just defending this h3 pawn. So yeah, so here we had g4. So yeah, I like the concept of G4 attacking the pin piece. So this is something we talk about a ton in class. Whenever you see a pin piece, you want to attack it. So kudos to Bryan for spotting this idea. The only problem is that there's a counter pin here. So after the pawn takes, this f pawn can't take back because there's also a pin. So yeah, this was a bit unfortunate for Bryan, but also a good job by Steven for seeing this counter attacking idea. So yeah, probably we do want to play g4, I would think, but maybe we need to prepare it by getting our king off the f file. So something like maybe king g7 or even king g6 would do a better job preparing this g4 move, because now our king would not be pinned anymore along the f file. Okay, so g4 take, and then okay, king g6 here. Okay, knight d5. So yeah, really good move by Steven, improving his knight. And notice in the Sicilian that this d5 square is almost always a very important square. White is always just trying to get like especially a knight, but sometimes like a bishop or a rook. But especially if they get a knight on d5, they can really cause a lot of problems for black in these positions. So we had queen e6 and then knight takes. So I think this knight takes is is probably a bit of a mistake. It might not look like this knight is so effective, but it really is. Like, remember, this like knight in the center is it's just about as good of a piece as you could want here. And this bishop has some long-term very good prospects, but I'd say right now it's not doing too much. So if we played something like say rook d e1, kind of trying to put a pin on the e file, we're already threatening knight f4 check, forking the queen and the king. So I think a move like this, just keeping the tension, would have been a better opportunity to kind of improve your position. You might be allowing like bishop g5, guarding the f4 square, but here even after knight f4 check, they have this check again, and then we're gonna pick up the e5 pawn when the king moves. And I think here we just have a much better position as white. And we also have queen g5 check coming up. We might even be able to play it here now, but I think we should throw this rook takes e5 move in first, and then probably play queen g5, just ganging up on the f5 pawn. And yeah, here I think black could basically resign. So yeah, whenever you have a question about whether you want to make a trade, just try to think about not in general terms of like which piece is more valuable, but in specific terms like which piece is better in this exact position. So here I would say that the knight on d5 is much better than the bishop on e7. So I think we could just build up the position a bit with rook d e1, creating a pin, and kind of see what black does. So say for example that black moves the queen to d6 or f6 to get out of the pin. We always could like trade the knights here, and then we just gain like an important tempo for improving the rook. Because I think the rook is much better on e1, attacking the black pawn than it was on d1, where it was just a defensive piece. So yeah, so notice that we got an opportunity to improve our rook just by not instantly taking the bishop here. Okay, so queen f3. Yeah, so queen f3 is an attacking move. It's putting some pressure on the f5 pawn, but it does give up control of the h3 pawn. So Bryan and I did go over this position in our lesson. So yeah, here I think just rook takes h3, and then just bring the rook back to h5, defending the pawn. And I think that we're quite that black should be quite happy. So I think of the move like g4. This is the only thing that I would be a bit worried about. But here I think we have queen g5, creating a counter pin, and then after this I think we just pick up the g pawn with check. And I don't know if we're better as black, but I don't think we're worse either, because we should be the one that controls the h file, I believe, at the end of all this. I don't know. Maybe we do just give white an opportunity to trade off some pieces. So okay, so I'd say we are still slightly worse as black, just because we are down down one pawn, 4 pawns for white and 3 pawns for black. But I do think that this I don't know, maybe this wasn't actually as good for black as I originally thought. And I don't know, maybe you could even make an argument that Bryan's move of rook af8 is better. But I would say, yeah, I'd be shocked if just rook takes h3 is not the line that the computer is giving here. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna end up shocked. So, huh? Okay, I can't believe that this is not. Oh, okay, hangs the rook at the end. Okay, so that's not so good. Okay. All right. So my apologies to Bryan. So I pretty much led him astray then with this variation. So that is my bad. Um, huh. Yeah. Just during the game, I really didn't think this Queen F3 move was right because it does give up the pawn. But I guess Steven and Bryan analyzed reached a better conclusion than I did, which is good to see. So, um, huh? Yeah, I'm surprised Queen F3 was able to work out as well as it does. Okay, so really nice move by Bryan then. So I stand corrected on this point. So rook A F8, defending the pawn, and then G4. Okay, so here, yeah, here we're just trying to put more pressure on the F5 square. So if the pawn takes after queen takes, this would be a tough position for black to deal with. Their king is pretty exposed, and there's a lot of open files to the black king. So during the game, I was really hoping that Bryan would play this move F4, just keeping the file closed, which he did. So Queen E4 check, King G7. Okay, yeah, and this move I really struggled to understand. So I assumed the idea was to play B4 and try to open the position up, but yeah, with the king stuck in the center, or not stuck in the center, with the king um, really not very well protected, like the H3 pawn is hanging, for example. We don't really have time for these type of maneuvers. Like our king is going to get pretty exposed here pretty quickly. Okay, and then here, okay, so here I think this position is just much better for black now. So Bryan and I also looked at this position. We looked at rook G3 check, which I think is probably good, but I think the best move is actually just rook E3 here. So we're just basically trying to attack the queen and then guard the e pawn, so that we can play our queen to H4 and threaten to basically just we're just basically gonna have an unstoppable attack here. So I think, yeah, I think rook e3 is the best practical move. I am curious if there's any kind of forced checkmate after rook g3, but after the king moves to f2, I don't really see any forced checkmate. Here we probably could just go rook e3 here with the idea being that that queen h4 is now with check, but the queen can go to h1. But after rook h8, just taking control of the h file, then yeah, queen h4 next move should be quite difficult to meet. So for example, let's say we have something like this looks like a good sample variation, and yeah, at the very least we're picking up the queen, and I think we're also going to give a checkmate here because the queen is pinned now, so we're threatening queen h2 and then queen takes g2 mate here, and if the king runs away to f2, then after it takes, the king doesn't have to take, but otherwise there's down a queen for nothing. This is also a checkmate. So yeah, let's see. So let's see what the computer gives. I have a feeling it might give rook g3 and then rook e3 as the best variation here. So yeah, it's basically completely even between rook g3 and rook e3 are the best moves here. Both should win on the spot here. And then yeah, this rook g3, king f2, rook e3 line is what we just looked at. And already here they're saying the best for white is to just give up the queen. And here there should just be yeah, just much worse here. Okay, so yeah, so here, so when we're attacking, we want to be just as precise when we're attacking as when we're defending. So I think a lot of people have the tendency that when they're attacking, they kind of miss some things because they just feel like they don't need to be like quite that precise. But when you want to conduct an attack successfully, you have to be as precise as if you were defending your own king. So here, queen h4. I think this is a logical move from the point of view that it gets the queen active. But I definitely wouldn't want to allow my opponent counterplay. So here we're giving up the e pawn, which we didn't need to do. We definitely didn't need to give up this pawn. So king g6, queen e6, and now you can see that we're just allowing some checks against our king. And I probably went too fast here. There's a lot, but there's a lot of variations here. So something like this. Oh shoot, the pawn's there. I'm sorry. So something like this. And I don't know, maybe here I think we're just still much better as black. So there was a lot of possible continuations here. Um, yeah, but yeah, I think that King G5 was quite logical. I was expecting kind of forget what I was expecting here. I think I was expecting Queen E5 check here. Well, let's see, what else was I expecting here? Yeah, everything has to do with check because Black is threatening Queen G3 mate here. So I kind of forgot what I was looking at during the game exactly. I feel like it was something like this maybe. And then notice that if we block with the queen, this would be a really bad move because that's going to lose the rook. So what else was I thinking about here? So yeah, I was wondering if we did just have a perpetual check here as for white in this position. So I think this is what I was looking at if I remember now. Because after the if the king goes to the f file, we can take the rook with check. And here I think I think we're it's probably black who's getting checkmated because they have this check here, and then queen d6 is mate here. So yeah, so that would be a possible swindle try for white. So yeah, so I think queen e5 check is the best move, and then after king goes back to g6, then we have. Then here we could even try to trade off the queens perhaps, and I still think that we're much worse as we're probably much. Well, I don't know if we're much worse as white anymore because I think maybe our king actually can kind of wiggle away. So it's I'm not. This is still anyone's game. I think anything could happen here, but I think white has survived the worst after this maneuver. So I think I think Steven should have kept going for these checks. I think when he yeah, kind of when he allowed the trade of queens, then this was not so great for him. Here though, okay, so here I think he's still okay. He should probably just play queen g7, and then here I think we just have perpetual, or apparently not. I'm not sure why we don't have perpetual. I think the engine is a bit slow in realizing this is perpetual, I believe, because they're not suggesting any other moves. So yeah, so I don't know why the evaluation should be 0.00 because it's just a perpetual here. If the king goes to f5, yeah, this engine is really quite slow, I think, in identifying what's going on here. Yeah, this just seems hard to believe that we're not just. Yeah, I don't get why the analysis isn't changing. So to me, this engine is just. Yeah, this is just not very good. So here at the very least we have perpetual, but notice the evaluation is not changing. So that's definitely an inaccurate. The engine is definitely incorrect here because they're not suggesting any improvements at all. So yeah, let's go back to the game though, and let me go back a few moves because we might have got confused by all the other variations we were looking at. All right, so this is back to the game. And then, yeah, here I think, so I understand why Steven wants to trade the queens off because he does notice that his king is in danger, and he thinks if he can get the best attacking piece for black off the board, then his king will be safer. So I think he's partially right there. I think the thing he might have missed is that the black king was also extremely weak. So if he would have maybe just kept giving checks, I think that would have been the safest option. So yeah, so now this f pawn is quite strong, and I think the way Bryan played the next few moves was quite instructive. So we had rook be1 here. I think that so okay. Let's look at. So I think rook f3 should not work because of this check. Yeah, and then check here, and then I believe. Yeah, so here we're just going to end up winning the b rook. So that should have spotted that a lot quicker. Yeah, so here we're just going to win the rook on b1. So yeah, so rook f3 trying to stop the pawn from advancing isn't really very strong, and this is what this move is called is blockading. So rooks aren't really known as good blockaders. The best piece that you want for blockading is knights because knights can just kind of hop around and jump back. So blockading is the concept of just putting a piece in the way of an enemy pawn, or theoretically like any piece, but the enemy pawn is the most common, and it's just stopping the pawn from advancing, and then what generally happens here is that side is the attacking side is trying to break the blockade so they can move the pawn, and the other side is just trying to keep the blockade by saying, I'm just going to be able to keep a piece here forever, and I'm going to stop this pawn from moving. And that's when the game can get quite exciting, because one side is just trying to get rid of the blockading piece, and the other side is just trying to keep the blockading piece. All right, so here we had rook b to e1. So yeah, I think we could see now that the rook to b1 didn't really make too much sense in this position, because the rook really never did anything on b1. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so here we had f3, and yeah, I really like the way that Bryan played these next few moves here. I thought this was very good chess. So after king g1, there's a really cool idea here of rook g2, and then here we just want to move the king off the h file so the rook can move to the h file. So yeah, so king like I think we also would like to. No, it doesn't even. We would. Yeah, we'd like to protect the rook and the pawn. So if we played, for example, like king h4 here, and then even this wins though, because we could take with the king, and this is going to win for black. But yeah, I think the absolute most precise move is just king g3 here. This way we protect the rook, we protect the pawn, and we keep the h file open for the black rook. And this is there's no stopping the checkmate eventually. I guess you could give up a piece. So I don't know if I guess we could prevent the checkmate, but we're gonna lose the game. We're just down a whole rook here as white. So Steven assessed this quite nicely. So he brought the I'm sorry. Yeah, I keep going through these other variations, and then I know it's kind of probably confusing when you're watching when we go back. So yeah, let me just kind of calm down a second when we go back and give you guys time to reorientate yourselves. So here we had f3 check, king f2, rook h2, and then king e3. So yeah, this was all really nice, and then f2, perfect. So yeah, so we're making like basically all of the white pieces are passive, and this is what I did talk with Bryan when we went over this game. We didn't go over the whole game because I told him I was going to make a video, but we did go over this position because I thought this would be really helpful for him. So yeah, we basically have one square left to get the pawn to queen. And yeah, so I think this rook e2 move is quite logical, and then queen g3. So yeah, so here basically all the white pieces are tied down to protecting the pawn, and all the black pieces are sort of also tied down at the moment to the pawn. But since the black pieces are the one attacking and the white pieces are the ones defending, it should be just so much easier for the black pieces to improve, whereas these white pieces are never really going to ever improve. So all black has to do is figure out a construction to improve their pieces and kind of get rid of this blockading piece. So here Bryan played a3 because there wasn't too much else to do. And here Bryan and I spent a lot of time in the lesson talking about this next sequence of moves. So here what ended up happening was, what I told Bryan is that this rook is a very good rook. It's protecting the pawn from behind, which is what you want. You want your rooks behind past pawns. And it basically has like so much scope where this rook can move. Whereas this rook on e2 is not a good piece at all. Its only job is to guard the f2 square. And right now the only square it can move to is d2. This is the only square at all the rook can move to. So when we make trades, we're kind of beyond the stage of just saying like, this is a rook, this is a rook. Let's just trade rooks. Like, we want to start thinking about the quality of our pieces. So even though these are both rooks, this rook on f8 is so much better than this rook on e2. It has so many attacking possibilities. So the idea that we trade off, that we spend 2 moves to trade off these rooks was just, it's not a decision. It's not what you want to do. You don't want to trade off a really good rook for a really passive rook. So during the lesson, we talked about this a lot, and Bryan came up with a lot of really good ideas here. So we talked about this rook f3 move, which I think is clearly the best move. So here, if the king goes to the 4th rank, we could just push the king back even more. And there's probably even like better ideas here, but something like this we looked at a lot. And then it actually got like a little bit more complicated than I thought, because there is still the pin on the 2nd rank. But after just rook h1 attacking the 1st rank here, there's really nothing at all for black to do here. And then say instead of moving the rook here, what happens if they go here and then just exploiting the pin? Here we just have to get out of the pin, and then there's nothing really left to worry about. We just have to worry a little bit about the about this endgame here, but I think that I think that we should be quite fine here as black. Yeah, just the pawns aren't advanced enough, and the black king is also very active. So so yeah, so this should be fairly easy work. So like here, for example, we have d4. We could play probably something like rook h5 is playable. Also, maybe just rook c1. I don't know, rook c1 doesn't seem so strong, but it's probably something like here, forcing c3, and then I think we just keep improving our pieces, and yeah, we should be well on our way to a pretty easy victory here. You do have to be a bit precise, but I don't think this should be too much trouble. Yeah, so I think yeah, I think rook f3 is just so much better than rook e8 here, um, and just for the reasons we talked about, like we don't want to give away an active rook for a passive rook. And then yeah, here I don't see how we could really how we're holding this position as black now. So we can't really move the king anywhere because it won't be guarding the g2 pawn. So I think we're just basically left with moving the a pawn, which is going to run out of move soon, and moving the rook. So say we go something like a5 here. I think just something like c3. No, c3 would be bad because we would allow a4. So let's say something like b3. So just to clarify that, if we play c3, a4 does make the b pawn backwards. So I still think this is probably winning for white just after d4. But we like I said, when we're attacking or defending, we want to try to be as precise as we can. So the idea behind b3 is that we're not allowing a4. And then here after rook g1, I think now we just go c3, and then again even d4. No, not yet d4. All right, so c3, and then maybe say rook g1. So now I don't think we do anything. We just leave the king here to protect the rook, and then here we just try to go get a pass pawn and go win the game here, which I think we should be able to do quite easily. So the yeah, so the pawn has to take, and then the yeah, take, and now the king has to run back to get inside the square. So remember the concept of the square here. The black king needs to get in the square in order to catch the pawn. So here we just pick up this pawn, and then yeah, with these two pawns and the rook being like supporting the pawns already, this is just going to be a piece of cake win for white here. And if we do need to work on this again, we can do this in class, but I think you guys should be able to win this without any problems at all. Okay, so let's go back to the game. So yeah, king takes e2, king g2. So yeah, this move was a mistake because it cuts the rook off from guarding the pawn. But the position is already lost here for black now. Once they traded off their active rook for the passive rook, that's when the whole game changed. So if they would keep the active rook on the board and just keep the pressure on, then this position is clearly winning for black. But when they traded the active rook for the passive rook, then it's lost for black. So yeah, so this is a really good lesson here. When you have this attacking position, try to build the pressure. You don't want to try to release the pressure on your opponent. You just want to keep making moves that just make it more and more annoying for your opponent to deal with. You never want to start like simplifying the position. When you're the attacking side, it's the defending side is the one that wants to simplify because they're the ones that are under pressure, and they're the ones that want to like not be under pressure anymore. But when you're the attacking side, you want to try to keep building up the attack if you can. And yeah, here after a move like rook f3, you would be able to, even if you can't find rook f3. I mean, you could just start like moving the a pawn, for example. But eventually I think you would have to find this rook f3 move. So yeah. There's two ways to attack with a rook, right? You could attack vertically like this, and you could also attack horizontally like this. So you want to try to keep both of those possibilities in mind here. Okay, yeah. So it's hard to recommend the move for black here, but this move is definitely not going to work because now there's two white attackers on the pawn, and there's only one defender since we cut off communication between the rook and the pawn when we moved the king in the way. But yeah, here Stephen, yeah, he must have just missed this possibility. So he moved the rook to d1, and now it's actually, funny enough, it's actually black that's winning now. So Bryan and I also went over this during the class. All he has to do is basically move the rook to h8 and control the e-file. And then once he controls the e-file, he'll have one defender on the f8 square versus one attacker. and he will be able to promote the pawn in exchange for the rook, and also have a winning endgame here. So yeah, so anything like that would have been good. Yeah, but here Bryan played rook h1, so he basically allowed his king to get deflected away from the pawn. So after the rook takes, then the king takes back, and there's no defense of the pawn. So yeah, so here the game wrapped up pretty shortly because Bryan realized he was just going to lose his pawns. So after something like king e4 and king d5 picking up the c pawn, then White would at the very least have a passed d pawn, depending on where the yeah, I think he's just gonna have a passed c and d pawn. So yeah, so king e4, king f2, king d5, king e2, king takes c5, and yeah, the king is not is 2 squares away from c2 still, so it can't take on c2. And then yeah, basically you just run up the board with the e or the c pawn, probably the d pawn. I'm sorry, not the e pawn. The d and the c pawn just run up the board, and yeah, and then you get a queen and you go and checkmate the king. But yeah, this was a really spectacular game. This was the best game I've seen in the 3 tournaments we had so far, which shows that there's definitely some improvement, especially by Bryan. Like I said, I haven't worked with Steven that much, so I think Steven was already quite a strong player when we started working together. So my job is just to kind of fast track his improvement so he becomes an even better player, which we will work hard to accomplish that. But I think that the improvement from Bryan is quite noticeable to me. He missed just a few key moves here that would have won him the game. So yeah, I think Bryan should be really happy with the improvement. I know that kind of from talking to him, I know he'd like to improve even faster. We all would. I would like to improve faster, but the improvement he has made already has been, in my opinion, like quite noticeable. So yeah, so excellent job, Steven and Bryan. This was a really nice game that you guys played, and I'm looking forward to seeing some. I'm sure you guys are going to play a lot of more good games in the future. And this was really impressive. We haven't really had any games where um, you could kind of see some. I don't want to hype up the game too much. I don't want to, but you could kind of see like this is kind of how strong players really. These are kind of the maneuvers they're finding in chess games, and I think you guys found some of those. So I think yeah, this was a really strong effort by you guys, and since it also was an important game in the tournament, I could tell you guys were trying hard to play a good game here. So yeah, thanks for your effort, and thanks for watching the video. If you guys have any questions, just ask me during the lessons or anything like that. Some of the concepts, for me, they're not so difficult because I've been playing chess for a long time. So I might go over something quite quickly that you guys might want further explanation over. So if that's the case, just ask. Yeah, but really nice game, guys. And then yeah, I'll keep trying to make these videos. They should be all done a lot sooner than I thought they would be because we had a lot less games than I anticipated. All right, so thank you guys, and hopefully you guys keep tuning in. Take care.